Created live on Fireside. Welcome, everyone, to another great episode of Where's the Beef? I'm your host, WendiCooper, and this is where tech kind of versus creative, and we talk about advertising, marketing, technology, and culture, and pretty much what's happening in the startup world when it comes to today's culture. Let's just be honest. So, what are we going to discuss today, and who am I going to discuss it with? Well, first of all, this was recorded live on Fireside. If you want to hear that show in its entirety before I edited the crap out of it, which I'm in the process of doing as we speak, then you can go to firesidechat.com/WendiCooper, and you'll find it there, the entire replay. But why not just stick around for this amazing show conversation I had with Kane Simms of VUX World. He is located in the UK, and he is the founder of VUX World, an AI consultancy and front door to the future of AI-powered customer experience, and host of VUX World podcast, where he interviews just about everybody but me. That's kind of an inside joke. You can find him on YouTube. His hashtag is VUX World everywhere, he says. And he's very active on LinkedIn, which is linkedin.com/IN/Kane Simms. You can also find me in those places too. While I'm at it, you might as well know that I also have other podcasts. One is The WendiCooper Show, Conversations with Remarkable People Over 50, and The 5 with WendiCooper that you can find everywhere you get your podcast as well, but not on Fireside. Only this one is on Fireside. Anyway, today we're going to talk about how Kane got into the space of AI and voice experience. We're going to talk about the similarities and the challenges that it has in consumer adoption, or the similarities that it actually has with the challenges that have always been prevalent in artificial intelligence when it comes to voice, and how Alexa skills are and maybe the new gateway to building your brand and enhancing your ROI. Let's see, what else are we going to talk about? And we're going to talk about the amount of money that is going into startups, especially in the AI space. So, without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Kane Simms to Where's the Beef?
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's been a long time coming. I think that's a nice little round of applause. I think we first spoke 2 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago.
I think it's actually been more like 3 years ago. It was funny, and I'm now speaking to you, the audience, because I contacted Kane because I wanted to talk to him about how I saw the similarities of direct response using cheap media in order to build a brand, and I saw Alexa skills as being able to create great audio experiences, but for very little money going in. Anyway, that was 3 years ago. I was really into creating voice experiences, and it was a little bit behind. So now here it is, fast forward 2.5 years, and Kane is on my show, and we're talking about it. But first, I did ask him, how the heck did you get into this space to begin with? And I found it really, really interesting, because it's kind of like how I found myself in this interesting voice space.
I thought I seen an advert or something like that for Alexa. And at the time, I think it was probably 2017, something like that. I think it had just come out in the UK. It'd been out in the US for a number of years. I think it was released in 2014. It came out in the UK about 2017. And I came across it in around about end of 2017, early 2018. And what was interesting is that if you go back in my kind of career and all that kind of stuff, not even career before then, I used to make music when I was a lot younger. And I used to write quite a lot when I was younger. And so this kind of interest in audio production was something that I'd had from the age of about 13, 14, and a fascination with language and words and how words sound and how you can put them together to make things like songs and how they rhyme and stuff like that. And so that was the very, very early stuff that I was doing. And then I remember I went back to university. I used to run events and stuff like that, purely as a way of just performing music. And so that got me interested in marketing. So I went to uni, studied marketing, and worked for a couple of marketing agencies, which got me interested in, psychology, customer behavior, attitudes, trends, technology, which then took me closer to the end user, because I thought, when marketing teams can only do so much, what really matters is actually getting in the place where you're creating stuff for people. So I went into service design, and I was working in government for a long time, working on end-to-end service design initiatives, and managed a number of digital transformation programs, and got into this whole world of business modernization in order to then better serve the customer. And when I saw Alexa, long-winded way of saying that, when I saw Alexa, immediately I thought to myself, and this was I knew nothing about it. I knew no idea of its capabilities. I just saw an advert, and I thought, that looks absolutely perfect, because the interface is an audible interface, and my history and background is in creating audio. It's spoken words, so my fascination of writing, I was also a freelance writer for a while, my fascination of words and language was obvious. And then I thought, what would be really good is if you could actually build stuff for it, create stuff for it, because that's an entirely new type of user experience. And then I thought I'd coined the term VUX at the time, and I immediately registered the domain name VUX.world, because I thought, what would be better than exploring this new emerging interface and creating the destination for it. And if I go back and even now search to this day for when the date I registered VUX World, which I think was June 2018, there's only 2 mentions ever in the internet of the term VUX as it relates to voice user interface design and voice user experience. And so I didn't coin it. There was 2 people that were there before me, but I do like to think that I was pretty early with it. And basically, without even realizing it, I didn't know it was possible to build interactions for it until I dug a bit deeper. And so it turns out that you need to understand user experience. You need to be able to craft an interactive audible interface. You need to be able to write really well. You need to understand user experience design principles. But more importantly, this is where the service design stuff comes in, is that a voice user interface on its own is pointless. It has to do something for people, get a job done. And in order to do that, it needs to be integrated into business systems and all that kind of stuff. And so that's where it started. It was just an amalgamation of everything I've been interested in over the years, all sort of like showing itself up in this little hockey puck on the side of the table.
I think that's awesome, because you know what? That hockey puck showed me a lot too. And I explained to Kane here that, it was basically an amalgamation of everything that I have done, from getting into direct response infomercials back in the early 90s. Running those campaigns, managing those campaigns, there's a lot of different elements to it. And so you have to know copywriting, you have to know marketing, and you have to know your customer. You have to really understand your customer, because you also need to write inbound and outbound telemarketing scripts, which are now called conversation design, if you're going to do that for voice AI, for Google, Alexa, Bixby, whatever the platform might be. You really have to understand the consumer. And it's rare that you speak to someone like, as I'm speaking to Kane, about how difficult it is to get over not only the same challenges we've had for many years in inbound telemarketing, IVR solutions that are half, automated, how they really didn't save us any money, yet they were supposed to back in the day, and the cost per call still was very high with a human agent. It's a very complicated business. And it's not easy. And even with the technology today, it is still very difficult to, I think Kane can maybe explain.
Yeah. So the challenge that you kind of alluded to is that businesses have had the very same problems for a long time, and when you talk about a call center there, and the contact centers and customer service departments have always had the exact same problem, which is that too many people call them, It takes them a long time to handle a phone call. Therefore, too many people are waiting on hold. And when they get through to someone, it's not the right department, and so they need to be shifted over to another department. There's no context within the organization. So when you get put through to that new department, you start your conversation all over again. It's a big waste of time for everybody involved. The business doesn't have any intelligence on what people are calling for, so it can't actually solve the problems. It doesn't really know what people are calling for. Most of the ways that contact centers make a record of what people are calling about is after the call. The agent who's answered the call has a quick type up and says, this was about repayments, this was about complaints. So enterprises are just completely, they're data rich, but they're insight poor. They've got data because they're having so much calls coming through the contact center, but they've got no insights because they can't understand any of it. And so,
this is true. I used to actually listen to the calls, and so that I could have the information that I needed in order to make the customer experience better, the stick rate, the churn, whatever it might be. We would literally listen to the calls.
And you can't do that for 4 million calls a month. So those problems have always existed, and the IVR potentially could have solved some of that problem by getting someone to the right place in the first place. The problem with that is, if anyone's designed an IVR system before, it's a little bit like designing a website. You kind of use your knowledge. People understand what they say. Press 1, press 2, and then whatever goes out there goes out there. Now, most web designers, most web design companies, app companies will tell you, and most businesses will actually tell themselves that when we go live with something, that's kind of the beginning of the journey. What we want to do is analyze it and change and iterate over time. The reality is that doesn't really happen most of the time. Things go live, they fire and forget, they get forgotten about, and every now and then something changes and gets updated. So that's what happened with IVRs. IVRs were created, but they were also created for like the main priority use cases. So if you were calling about something really obscure, like, I don't know, your modem was working a moment ago, but it's not working anymore, and you know that there's a problem up the street, but that's not related to you because your neighbour's is turned on, and you've got a really kind of like precise query, you're never going to get through an IVR and get to the right person because you can't describe what it is that you need, And so,
that's absolutely true. And if the dog barks, it disconnects or it transfers you over to a human, and that costs you more money as opposed to saving money, because now you have to pay a transfer fee to a human.
In the same way as a web UI confines the decision making of a user, because you're restricted to the screen that you have, the size of the screen and the amount of information and options and clickable things you can put on that screen. With an IVR, you're limited still by the number of options you can have. Press 1 for this, press 2 for that. Nobody wants to listen to an IVR for long enough and listen to it get to, for such and such press 25, and for such and such press 26. It just takes, it would never ever happen. And so you're constrained in terms of what you can offer, and you're kind of trying to force a user down a certain path. Whereas with recent kind of advancements with natural language understanding, natural language processing, there is a lot more scope. Now, it's important to say that it's not a silver bullet, but what it will do is it will, 1, perform better than a normal IVR, and 2, actually get you data, which is that what your customers are asking you for, you can grab hold of that, parse that, understand it, and generate insights from it. And so there's a company, Comwave, in Canada. They used Dialogflow to automate some of their incoming support requests, right? Customers would call them up. They are a telco. They'd call them up, I've got a problem with my modem, got a problem with my router, my phone's down, whatever it might be, and they'd log a ticket. And what ended up happening is the bot was working well enough. I think they got it to something like 80% success rate. So imagine taking 80% of your support calls out of your contact center and having them being self-served. Big achievements. But importantly, what they were able to do is they were able to identify things that were going on that the business had no clue about. People are calling up about payments and stuff like that. Turns out that the billing system had made a mistake and printed a bunch of wrong bills that they didn't know about. They have something then to take to their billing supplier. Some they were finding outages that they didn't know about. Customers calling up saying my motor's gone down, the whole street's down, or whatever it might be. And they were gathering information about the performance of their business because they had this technology in play. And so the post you were getting at around the number of companies that have received funding, I mean, that was just a snapshot. I think there was about 20 on the list. There's technology companies, there's design companies, there's infrastructure companies, there's a whole bunch of them getting millions and millions of pounds of venture capital raised. And it's all because they have capabilities that are going to further this cause, not just the cause around IVRs and making customer service better, but the cause around understanding intent, the cause around understanding sentiment, creating tooling that enables anyone to build and launch conversational AI applications across a whole range of channels, from messaging to emails to voice assistants to contact centers, tools for agents. There's a whole bunch of capabilities out there. And it seems as though 2021 is the year when people are throwing money at it.
Yeah, man, they're throwing buckets of money at it. And what fascinates me is, you got to remember the theme of this show, everyone listening. This is, tech versus creative. And I find it really interesting now that I kind of revisit this, because we are in an edit process here, right? I'm now re-listening to Kane. I'm coming in and I'm giving a little bit of my 2 cents, because when you're producing a live show, it's hard to actually listen and for yourself to make sense. So this is an edited edition. We all know that. Okay, so what Kane is basically saying surprises me, that it takes today's tech knowledge in order to create systems that are state of the art enough to say, hey, look, we saw a red flag, or there was a bill payment problem. We used to see that stuff a lot of different ways, right? Influx, a spike in customer service, a spike in hangups, a spike in all sorts of different things. And so we would look at it, we would look at our data in a different way. But now, because of technology, I'm assuming that it's like an epiphany that, hey, look, we can use it deeper to actually improve our customer experience and our ROI for our brand. Back to Kane, by the way, you guys.
Yeah. You've got a bunch of problems happening, right? One is that most of these systems are trained on whatever data is available by whoever is building it. Now, you'll know, and the people tuning in will know, that there is a unrepresentative proportion of white people working in technology, and whatever subconscious biases they might have and whatever training data might be available, most of these systems are trained or at least perform better if you are, to be honest, white, male, and American. They perform okay if you're white, female, and American, but they start to diminish when you start looking at things like accents, if you're Mexican, for argument's sake. And actually, there's been studies showing that even if you're black, you could be, born and raised in America, speak with an American accent, your race is black, and some of these speech systems actually perform poor or poor in comparison to a white person, for argument's sake. So there's 100% issues that need to be solved, and it's all down to training data and what the systems have been trained on. And there's a number of different parts of the process that need training. So one is the speech recognition element, which is the most crucial bit, really, is that when you talk, the audio that you speak gets usually, there's on-device processing, but usually gets streamed up to the cloud. A provider like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, DeepGram, LumenVox, there's a bunch of other providers of text-to-speech technologies. They take that audio and they translate it into text. In order for them to translate it into text properly, they need to have a whole load of training data, 1,000 to 2,000 hours worth of audible training data to train their systems on. And if most of that training data comes from samples of white people, there's an overrepresentation of white voices in the model, which then makes it perform poorly with other accents and things like that. So this is the area that all of the tech companies are focusing on, because essentially not only is it terrible for just general accessibility and the exclusion of people from using these interfaces, but it's also completely restricts those companies' ability to grow. You can't launch something in Spanish if you can't understand half of the people that speak Spanish. You can't truly have, like Google can't truly have Google Assistant being the entry point to the internet if it can't understand, Indian women over 60. So they all have an agenda to improve it. But the reality is that the history of it all, going back to the 80s, is that there's just more training data available from certain samples, which means that systems overperform compared to other samples, which is something that does need to be sorted out.
I do know someone, Nigel White, and he is a 50-something-year-old black man. And And he's really into the voice space, especially diversity in voice. And that's his initiative. That's what he's all about. How do you bring diversity into the voice space? Because you're right. I mean, Kane's right, because I'm talking to you at home because, it's an edited version. But Kane is right. It is a very, very difficult thing. Kane has an accent. I have an accent. My husband's from Italy. He has an accent. In Italy alone, every Provence or whatever you call it has a dialect. Think about Germany, Switzerland. Switzerland has, I think, 3 or 4 different languages alone, and they all have different little quirky things. So natural language programming has to be done in a natural language of every language, and you can't have. You can't arrive over here and come to my house and speak to my hockey puck, which is the Alexi, and expect her to understand you if you're speaking with a heavy Italian accent and you're trying to speak English or you speak Italian. It's really, really, really interesting. And it also has to do then, once again, it falls back to consumer adoption, because if it makes the experience difficult for the consumer, then adoption is always going to be low. So it's kind of like, I think I bring the analogy to Kane, it's the chicken and the egg kind of thing. Like, how do you make this happen? This is what we've been trying to figure out for years. Now, technology is catching up with us because of healthcare. I think voice in healthcare is awesome. My father is 93 years old. His whole home is controlled by Alexa, and we feel safe for that reason. So there is so much value in the voice space on so many different levels.
Interfaces are cropping up in a bunch of different devices. When people talk about the Internet of Things, yes, you might have connected street lamps that send data back that will tell the central electricity hub when the lamp goes out. That would be classed as the Internet of Things, potentially, if it's connected to the internet in some way. But most of the devices that we call connected devices, things like thermostats and washing machines and all this Hoovers and cars, all of these things that are becoming connected, the common thread that they have is that, yes, they're connected to the internet, but the way that you access the features that they offer is through your voice. And so for a long time, obviously, the voice was just the internet was accessed through the web browser. That was the only way you could access it. Then it moved into mobile. That was the only way you could access it then. The web browser, the interface was the keyboard and mouse. The mobile phone, the interface was a touchscreen. So now we're moving away from screens because the internet is available in lots and lots of different places now, and a growing number of places. And the new interface, the interfaces tend to change every 10 years. The next interface is a voice interface. And so the voice assistants are just one element of that. But we're going to see voice interfaces probably all over the place, to the point where, and this is the trend I think is emerging at the moment, is Google used to control access to the internet, because everyone started with a search from a web browser and everyone used Google in the web browser. Then Google spent a lot of money on paying Apple to make sure that when people search on an iPhone, it goes to Google, because Google understood that the next interface, the next device type to access the internet on was going to be the mobile phone. And so Google were moving hell for leather, paying through the nose to make sure that any search that happened on the internet on a mobile phone went to Google. Now what we're seeing is, because of the access points to the internet are just diverging and exploding, you can access the internet in your car, you can access it from your washing machine or your Hoover or your watch or your earpods or whatever. You can access the internet from absolutely anywhere. So Google is in real danger of losing its monopoly on being the access point to the internet. And that's what I think Google Assistant's strategy is over time, is to be in all of the places where you can access the internet and to be the default entry point into it. So Google Assistant, that's why you're seeing them built into TVs, you're seeing them built into watches and earphones and all kinds of different things, because wherever you can access the internet, whenever you want to get anything done, Google wants you to go through Google Assistant. So why is it not being adopted as much as we would have liked to? Well, how many people had a mobile phone in 1995? It wasn't that many people. And that was only a few years after, a decade after or so, mobile phones were released. How many people had a personal computer in 1992? quite a few, but not that many, not compared to how many have it now. And how many people have had access to the internet in 1998, you know? And the technology of the internet had been around since the 80s or the 70s or whatever it was, but it didn't reach mass adoption until a lot later on. And I think in this day and age, we're used to things reaching mass adoption a lot quicker because an app can launch in month one and have 1 million users at the end of month one, and the growth can be exponential. But what we're talking about here isn't an app. We're talking about an entirely new way of interacting with the world around us. And it's going to take a long time for people to have the confidence and the trust and the availability. Because the other thing is the availability. If I want to check my bank balance right now, I can't, because my bank don't have an Alexa skill. My bank aren't switched into Siri. They don't have a voice interface in their app or their website. So I cannot check my bank balance with my voice right now. So part of it is customer confidence and customer behavior. But the other part of it is availability. It's almost like you can't open a restaurant and invite people in unless you've got a menu figured out and people to cook the food. You need to have the menu in place before you bring people in. And at the moment, the menu isn't there because there isn't enough stuff on these voice assistants with voice interfaces for people to do. And so it is a bit chicken and egg.
Yes, it is a bit chicken and egg. I knew I made that comment somewhere. I am going to let Kane take a breath here. I'm remember, edited edition. I wish I had said something about, okay, I get that. I get the positioning of Google and what Google's thinking is. But on the other hand, my positioning or my thoughts a couple of years ago when everybody kept turning me down, except for one company did interview me about my concept, is that, all right, well, Amazon is the largest search engine, actually. And if you are a product brand or service and you can make yourself a product brand or service within the Amazon ecosystem by having an Alexa skill, which is an audio format that is dynamic and can be creative and really, really cool. You can tell stories, you can you can play games, you can add to it, you can take away, you can have the flash briefing for 5 minutes every day, or it's just what you can create is like a gold mine for someone who wants to create awesome audio, which, by the way, is me. But at the same time, you're inserting your product brand or service into the Amazon ecosystem, right? You are becoming a brand. So if you're an author, you can create this skill. You can give a little taste of different chapters, and then you can then sell the book, or it can be in addition to the book, or whatever it might be. People who listen to this, listen to that. People who listen to this skill, listen to that skill. You are becoming a brand in the largest search engine in America. And
so Amazon have to create access to the assistant. They absolutely have to. So the number one thing is create access points everywhere. Okay? Sell the devices cheap, get them in people's homes, get them hooked up. Same thing with Google, get access. And the next thing is what's available. Is what I need available at any time? And this is the whole long game. For Amazon, 110%, the strategy behind the Echo is that over time you will buy stuff. That has to be it. Google, the strategy is that Google wants to be the entry point to the internet, and all of your information needs to come from Google. And so they've both got slightly different aims, but they've got the same approach in getting there, which is get things adopted, get people doing some things regularly, like playing music, like listening to the news, getting updates, like setting timers. The most common use case on a mobile phone is obvious: make a call and send a message. And what ends up happening is, over time, and studies have found over the last 4 years that people who have a smart speaker use voice assistants on their mobile a lot more. We're starting to see use cases now of voice usage outside of the home, not just inside the home. And so these little tiny indicators, not from the whole population, but from that early adopting segment of the population, that they're getting comfortable using their voice to do stuff. And that's the main thing. Get comfortable using your voice to do stuff. Then over time, might be 2 years, might be 5 years, might be 10 years, when there is the ability for my bank, for me to get my bank balance in whichever interface, I won't really think twice about it, because I'm so confident with the interface. I use it for my heating. I use it for, starting my car. I'm so confident in it that naturally adoption will grow. The question, I suppose, is how long will that take, and will it actually happen like that? But I do think that the strategy from those two companies is get them into homes, find something that everyone can do, like play music and do it regularly, and then we'll figure it out later. That's part of it.
That's great, Kane. I totally agree with you. But consumer adoption is the key to success. And consumer adoption sometimes is only done through advertising and marketing, showing consumer adoption. Oh, if she can do it, I can do it. Oh, if they can do it, I can do it. Oh, look how easy that is. So that's my take on voice. There's so many opportunities, and yet there is so much money being spent, invested in artificial intelligence. It is a little bit down the pike when it's going to be ubiquitous. Obviously, this is what you've heard from Kane. And yet, as a creator, as a creative, as somebody who loves to create audio experiences, why aren't we just creating these audio experiences? There are so many content creators that are in podcasting, that are in audiobooks, that it's just crazy to me. So that's kind of where I come from. I come from this place where I understand consumer adoption. It's tough. I've had to do this for many years, 20 years, and convince people through television commercials, through testimonials, through use, through ease of use, through proof of concept that, yes, this new knife is awesome. Yes, this new chopper is awesome. Yes, you should lift your feet up to on a Squatty Potty or an EasyGo Pro in order to poop easier. These are all life changes that you have to do. And in my world, I understand that if you're going to bring something new that changes the habits of the consumer, that you either have to do that through really amazing marketing and advertising where people just go, oh, I got to have it. It's going to make my life easier. Or you're going to wait the long road, the long tail effect, right? Word of mouth. One person does it. Oh, you have an Alexa. Oh, I'm going to get one of those things. Oh, look, that was really cool that your home, you go and the TV goes on or the lights go out or they clap their hands and, rain falls from the sky. Or you can hear the baby, see the baby, watch the baby, see your husband. Is there ever any privacy anymore? Talking to your fridge, talking to your Hoover, as Kane would say, those are all great things. They're all great. But are they now? And how much money will be wasted? How much money will be spent? How much money, millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, will go into trying to create the technology for this natural language programming that needs to be done in all languages, when the reality is it just might not ever happen, because maybe it's just not possible for computers who are not human to be programmed like they are, and for them to understand us in our own conversations through human conversational design to program a computer. It's a big topic. Lots of money going into the space. But is it really what we want? I wonder if I should have asked Kane that question.
That's part of the challenge of a voice user interface, is that there is no guardrails, basically. There's no visual cues to teach you what you can do, essentially. And because we're used to having a conversation with humans, we're used to conversations being entirely open-ended and as broad as you like. If I was to say, hey, when did you like chicken? That's got nothing to do with the conversation that we're having, but you understand the question and you can answer me. So we have such a high expectation of what it is to have a conversation that those expectations aren't always met when we talk to our voice assistants, because voice assistants work in very narrow domains. They work well in narrow domains. Amazon can answer a lot of questions about music, a lot of questions about trivia, but that trivia question is all coming from Wolfram or Alfram Wolf, or whatever it's called, the knowledge graph. And Amazon's building its domains. Recipes is one, celebrities is one, and so over time it gets better at understanding certain domains, but it's not a complete open-ended, especially when you build something as a brand.
This is where the world is your oyster as a brand to build what you want. I don't know how else to actually say that.
Exactly, yeah. So as a brand, your options are, for the clients that I work with, we start from the very, very beginning. We don't talk about Alexa or Google Assistant. We start from the very, very beginning. What do your customers need from you? what do you do to reach your customers? What channels are in play? And what inbound and outbound activity happens across all of those channels? And then from within those customer journeys, you can understand, well, where are you failing? What's wrong? Where are the needs that your customers have that you're not meeting? And how can we fix that? And if the solution turns out to be maybe Alexa could be a good fix for this, then we'd suggest doing something with Alexa. Maybe it might be that you need something that's on WhatsApp. Maybe it's something in your call center. Maybe it's a chatbot. Maybe you've got a chatbot, and that's the root problem, is that it's a lot of rubbish. And so it all really does depend. It's all about the customer experience and the customer journey. But to answer the question directly about Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant, if you want to explore Amazon Alexa or Google Assistant, then you have a number of different options. With Google, you can mark up your website to index your web content. You can use app actions and app slices to get users into and extract data out of your apps on Android, or you can build conversational actions, which is what you've been alluding to, a back and forth interactive conversation between your action, your brand, and a user. And you do the same thing on Alexa, but Alexa is called Skills. And so think of them as apps. They're just conversational apps, basically. And they can be simple, they can be complex, they can be very cheap, they can be very expensive. It all depends on the brand and what you're trying to do, what features you want, and how engaging and all that kind of stuff you want it to be. But it is worth exploring, I would say. It's worth exploring. And it's not that no one's using it. I think you mentioned a few times that adoption is not there. There's a study that was done recently, I think this year, that found that 50% of Americans actually use some form of voice assistant, either on the mobile or on a smart speaker. Something like 33% of the UK have and use smart speakers. So, and then we see stories of skills that are the skills that were being built by hobbyists in their bedroom that get 15,000 users a day. The skills that just play ambient sounds get 150,000 users a day. So there is traffic to be had there, but it's not a case of you just build something and you put it out into the ether and traffic circulates around it, and then you can build a lot of paid products in there, and then everyone leaves happy. We're a little bit early in the adoption of the interface in general, and assistance in particular, for anything out of this world. But I think that the experimentation around what kind of conversations can we have with our customers, and how do we design that? How do we design the conversational flow and the dialogue? And you mentioned personality earlier on. How do we create a brand personality that can represent our brand within those conversations? Create the kind of customer experience that we want. Those questions are all questions that could do with answering for most brands, because as we fast forward over the next few years, conversational interfaces are, without a shadow of a doubt, going to become more prominent. It's my belief that the front-facing thing, the very first touch point that most people will have with a brand or an enterprise, will be an AI. They might not call it Erica, but it will be an AI. They would be smart if they did try and have consistency across channels, but they might not. And so the only place is, if even Facebook Messenger, go into Facebook Messenger, Google My Business supports bots. Instagram does, WhatsApp does, iMessage, Apple iMessage, business chat is on the way. You've got Amazon Alexa, you've got call centers, you've got chat interfaces, you've got emails, any platform, any channel that uses natural language. And I would argue that every single channel a business uses to do anything is having active conversations with their customers. Your website generates calls, it generates emails, you might have a live chat. Everything generates a conversation. Even someone clicking on an option, it's somebody saying, I'm interested in this on your website. So the whole business, everybody's business, is built on conversations. And we're going to be able to have more and more automated conversations in future across all of our channels, to the point where, as I said, I believe that the first touch point for most organizations in future is going to be an AI. And I think the sooner that you can learn how does your business behave in those environments, and how can you generate the skills to be able to create things for those environments, the better off you'll be.
I couldn't agree more. So this is where we wrap the show. I want to thank Kane Simms of VUX World for being here. All of his expertise, his opinions, his knowledge it's awesome that he took the time to share those with us today. I am your host, WendiCooper. You can find me at WendiCooper.com, the letter C, spotrun.com. You can also listen to the entire replay of this show in its raw, unedited version on firesidechat.com/WendiCooper. I preferred this one to that one, but if you want to hear what the reality was, go on over there. Make sure to contact Kane. He is in the UK. I am here in Los Angeles, the United States of America. I would love to work with you. I would love to be able to bring my creativity into your voice-first world. So don't hesitate to contact me. My email address is wendy@cspotrun or WendiCooper@Mac. You can follow me on Instagram. At IG is at Wendy Creates, Twitter, The Real Wendy Cooper. And I will hopefully see you all next week. Stay healthy, stay safe. Theme music is by Tom Orsi, and you can find him at Orsi Digital Post. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. This has been a C-Spot Run production, all rights reserved. And hey, check out my other podcast, The Wendy Cooper Show, conversations with remarkable people over 50, story views, and The Five, where I just have some fun. There's 151 episodes, 5 minutes to 7 minutes long, and you think you're going to enjoy them. Those are everywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like me to be a guest on your podcast, then please reach out to me at WendiCooper@Mac.com. Thanks for listening, everyone, again, and please stay healthy and stay safe.